In the solemn hush of St. Peter's Square, beneath a sky draped in grey, the heart of Vatican City mourned the passing of Pope Francis in April 2025. The ancient stones, worn by centuries of pilgrims, bore witness to a sea of black-clad mourners, their candles flickering like stars against the dusk. Among the vibrant blue and yellow uniforms of the Swiss Guard, Lucas Bowman stood rigid, his halberd gleaming faintly, his face a mask of disciplined resolve. For those of you who've lived through the trials of war, the quiet steadfastness of faith, or the enduring work of raising a family through decades of change, the Swiss Guard are a symbol of unwavering duty, their silence, a reflection of the traditions you've held dear. Perhaps the pride of a uniform worn in service, or the honor of a promise kept through hardship. But on this day, Lucas, a 35-year-old guard shaped by faith and family, would defy centuries of protocol with a single step, placing a letter on the Pope's casket. An act that would shake the Vatican and ripple across the world, proving that love sometimes demands we step out of line. Lucas Bowman was a man of quiet strength, his broad shoulders filling the Renaissance-era uniform, its stripes a vivid testament to his 14 years of service, raised in the shadow of the Swiss Alps. In a small village in Graubünden, he grew up on the stories of his father, Marcus, a former Swiss guard who had served under Pope John Paul II. By the firelight, Marcus would recount tales of Vatican honor standing vigil in the rain, protecting the Pope during a turbulent era, his voice thick with pride as he passed down his old ceremonial helm to Lucas. "It's a calling," Marcus had said, his eyes bright, his hands steady despite the years. "Not just duty, but devotion to you, who may recall the pride of a family legacy. Perhaps a grandfather's war medals, a mother's recipes handed down, or a father's tools still kept in the shed. Lucas' path might resonate, a testament to the power of heritage to shape a life. At Irviun, Lucas joined the guard, his discipline unmatched, his drills in St. Peter's Square a dance of precision under the glaring sun. His goal was clear, to serve the Pope, to honor his father's legacy, to stand as a sentinel of faith. But a secret meeting, days before Francis' death, would change everything. In a dim room thick with the scent of incense, Pope Francis, frail but resolute, had summoned Lucas, his white cassock hanging loosely on his thinning frame. The meeting was unlogged, a breach of protocol in itself, arranged quietly by Monsignor Ventresca, the Pope's trusted secretary. Lucas stood before Francis, his uniform pristine, his heart pounding beneath the weight of the moment. "You have a good heart, Lucas," Francis said, his voice soft but steady, his eyes piercing with the clarity that belied his illness. He handed Lucas a sealed letter, its wax seal, bearing the papal crest, its weight heavier than its size. "When the moment comes," Francis said, his gaze unwavering, "step out of line for love." Lucas' throat tightened, his fingers closing around the letter as he tucked it into his uniform. The words a cryptic command that stirred both reverence and fear. "For you, who've been entrusted with a responsibility, perhaps a family secret, a dying wish, or a duty that tested your courage." This moment might echo a time when trust came with a burden. Lucas' mission was now twofold: to honor his sworn duty as a guard, and to fulfill this sacred, mysterious wish, even if it meant breaking the Vatican's oldest traditions. The funeral in St. Peter's Square was a tableau of grief, the air thick with the tolling of bells and the murmur of prayers. Cardinals in scarlet robes stood solemn. Dignitaries from across the globe bowed their heads, and pilgrims clutched rosaries, their tears mingling with the April drizzle. Lucas stood among the Swiss Guard, his halberd steady, the letter a burning presence in his tunic, its weight was a constant reminder of Francis's words. Their meaning still unclear, but their urgency undeniable. As the Pope's casket passed, borne by pallbearers in black, its polished wood gleaming under the square's floodlights, Francis' voice echoed in Lucas's mind. Step out of line. The crowd held its breath. The moment sacred, the silence absolute. But Lucas' heart raced, torn between duty and faith. The protocol that bound him clashing with the Pope's command. His comrade, Matteo Ricci, a fellow guard with a stern face and a loyalty to tradition, hissed under his breath, "Don't you dare move." Matteo's glare was a warning. His clenched jaw, a reminder of the consequences: discipline, disgrace, perhaps dismissal. Lucas' gloved hand tightened, his eyes conflicted. The letter's seal pressing against his chest like a heartbeat. For you, who faced such crossroads, perhaps choosing between a job's demands and a family's needs, or between society's rules and your heart's truth. Lucas' struggle might stir a memory of a moment when courage meant risk. He thought of his father, Marcus, whose stories had taught him that honor was not just in standing still, but in standing for something. He thought of Francis, whose life had been a testament to love over rigidity, washing the feet of prisoners, embracing the sick, choosing a simple room over a palace. The casket drew closer, its golden cross catching the light, and Lucas felt the eyes of the crowd, the weight of history, the judgment of his comrades. Cardinal Rossi, a stern figure in the front row, watched with narrowed eyes, his presence a reminder of the Vatican's unyielding hierarchy. Matteo's warning echoed, but Francis's words were louder. A call that drowned out doubt. Lucas' resolve hardened, his fear giving way to a clarity that felt like grace. Then he moved. His boot struck the marble with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. A single step that shattered the silence of the square. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mourners gaping, their phones raised to capture the unthinkable. A Swiss guard breaking rank at the Pope's funeral. Lucas strode forward, his movements deliberate, his halberd steady in one hand. The world seemed to slow. The bells toll fading, the crowd's whispers a distant hum. He reached the casket, his heart pounding, and pulled the letter from his tunic, its seal unbroken, its paper glowing in the dim light. With trembling fingers, he placed it gently on the polished wood, its weight a final offering to the man who had trusted him. The letter rested there, a silent testament to a promise kept, its words hidden, but its presence profound. Lucas stepped back, his chest heaving, fear and resolve warring in his eyes. As he returned to his post, the crowd erupted in whispers, some outrage, others awestruck, their phones flashing like stars. Cardinal Rossi's glare burned. Matteo turned away, his jaw tight with betrayal. But a few pilgrims nodded, their tears a quiet approval. That night, Lucas faced the Vatican Council in a dim chamber, its walls lined with portraits of popes, whose eyes seemed to judge him. Cardinal Rossi, his scarlet robe stark against the stone, stood at the head of the table, his voice thunderous. "You've shamed the guard," he said, his finger pointing like a blade. "You broke protocol in front of the world, defiled a sacred moment. Explain yourself." Officers in crisp uniforms flanked him, their faces unreadable. And Cardinale Elena Moretti, a quieter presence, watched with thoughtful eyes. Lucas stood firm, his uniform pristine despite the weight of the moment. The letter now on the table before them, its seal broken, its words visible to all. True discipline is knowing when to move. Act for love, not tradition. Lucas' voice was steady, though his heart raced. "The Pope asked me to act for love," he said, quoting the letter, his eyes meeting Rossi's. "He entrusted me with this, knowing it would challenge tradition. I honored his will." The room was silent, the officers exchanging glances. Rossi's anger wavering as Moretti leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "Perhaps this was his will," she said, her eyes on the letter. "Francis lived for love, not rules. We must consider what he intended." The council debated, their voices clashing in the candlelit chamber. Rossi arguing for discipline, Moretti for mercy. Others torn between tradition and the Pope's legacy. Lucas stood silent, his thoughts on Francis, on the man who had seen his heart when he was just a guard, a boy from the Alps, carrying his father's helm. He thought of Marcus, whose pride would have swelled at this moment, even if it meant disgrace. The council's decision was unprecedented. Lucas would be spared dismissal, but reassigned to the Vatican archives, a quieter role away from the square spotlight. Rossi's voice was grudging as he delivered the verdict. You've escaped punishment, but you'll serve in shadows. Moretti, however, met Lucas privately, her smile warm as she handed him a small cross pendant, its silver gleaming. Your act honored Francis' heart, she said, her voice a balm. He chose you for a reason. Carry it forward. Lucas nodded. The pendant, a new weight in his hand, a symbol of a mission that was far from over. In the Vatican archives, a labyrinth of dusty halls and ancient manuscripts, Lucas began his new duty. His black uniform a stark contrast to the blue and yellow he had worn. Father Lorenzo, a wry archivist with a limp and a sharp wit, greeted him with a smirk. You stirred up trouble. Lad, he said, his eyes twinkling. But trouble's not always bad. Let's see what you're made of. Lorenzo guided Lucas through shelves of parchment and leather-bound tomes, their pages whispering secrets of the church's past. One day, Lucas found a 16th century manuscript. Its ink faded, but its story vivid. A guard named Giovanni, who had defied orders to save a relic from a fire. His act condemned by his peers, but praised by the Pope he served. The parallels struck Lucas like a bell, his fingers tracing the words. His heart lifted by the knowledge that he was not alone, that history held others who had stepped out of line for love, for you, who found solace in stories. Perhaps a book that spoke to your struggles, or a tale told by a grandparent. The manuscript might recall a moment when the past gave you strength to face the present. Months later, as Lucas catalogued documents in the archives quiet, a 10-year-old Italian boy, visiting with his school, recognized him. You're the brave guard, the boy said, his eyes bright, his finger pointing. My dad believes in God again because of you. He saw you on the news. Lucas knelt, his smile soft, his heart warmed by the boy's words. It's about honoring the heart, not just rules, he said, his voice gentle. The boy grinned, hugging him before running off, his laughter echoing in the stone halls. The encounter was a spark, a reminder that Lucas's act had reached beyond the Vatican. News of his story had spread, carried by the crowd's phones, by headlines in London, Manchester, and beyond. Swiss Guards Act inspires faith. A letter for the Pope, a lesson for the world. Letters poured into the Vatican, thousands of them, their envelopes bearing stamps from parishes and homes across the UK. A vicar from Yorkshire wrote, your courage reminded our congregation to act with love, not fear. A teacher from Sussex shared, my students pray for you, inspired by your faith. Social media buzzed with posts reading, he moved for love. A guard's defiance shows us God's heart. Lucas served in the shadows, his days filled with the rustle of parchment and the scent of old ink. The cross pendant gleaming at his throat. Francis' letter rested in a locked drawer, its words a sacred relic, its message a guide for his quiet mission. He catalogued the manuscript, each one a piece of the church's story, but his thoughts were on the Pope's legacy, love over rigidity, compassion over protocol. Father Lorenzo, once a skeptical, became a friend, sharing stories of his own youth in Naples, of a priest who had taught him to see faith in action, not just words. You're like him, Lorenzo said one evening, his smirk softening. You don't just guard, you live. Lucas smiled, the pendant warm against his skin, the letter's words alive in his heart. True discipline is knowing when to move. For you, who've served quietly, perhaps raising children through lean years, volunteering at a church, or helping a neighbor without fanfare. This quiet service might echo a life lived for others, a legacy built in small, unseen act. The Vatican, ever bound by tradition, felt the ripple of Lucas's act. The Swiss Guard, once rigid in their silence, began to speak of compassion in their barracks, their training subtly shifting to honor Francis's legacy. Cardinal Moretti, now a quiet advocate, ensured Luca's story was shared in private Vatican circles, a lesson for the Church's future. Matteo, once angry, sought Lucas out in the archives, his face softened by time. "I was wrong," he said, his voice low. "You honored him. I see that now." The two clasped hands, their bond mended, a testament to the power of understanding. The world beyond the Vatican continue to respond, with UK parishes launching initiatives in Francis's name: soup kitchens, shelters, prayer groups, all inspired by the Guard who had stepped out of line. A letter from a Birmingham grandmother read, "I cared for my son through illness, and your act reminds me why I kept going. Love is worth the risk." A veteran from Leeds wrote, "I served in 45, and your courage is like the men who risked all for their mates." In the quiet of the archives, under the soft light of dawn, filtering through high windows, Lucas continued his work, his hands steady, his heart full. The cross pendant gleamed, a reminder of Moretti's words, of Francis's trust, of a mission that had begun with a letter and would endure in silence. St. Peter's Square, just beyond the archive's walls, remained a place of pilgrimage, its guards standing vigil as they had for centuries, their halberds catching the sun, their silence a vow. But Lucas' story, and Francis's, lived on, a spark for those who believe in the power of love to transcend even the strictest traditions. For you, who've lived through decades of change, through the austerity of post-war Britain, the joy of family milestones, the sorrow of loved ones lost this tale, is a call to remember the moments that define us. Perhaps it's a time you broke a rule for kindness, a meal shared during rationing, a hand extended to a stranger, a promise kept despite the cost. Maybe it's a memory from the war, when you stood by a comrade, or a moment at home, when you chose love over fear, knowing it was enough to act. Francis' lesson and Lucas's defiance invite you to share those stories with your children, your grandchildren, your friends at the parish hall, your neighbors over a cup of tea. Write them in a letter. Tell them at a family gathering. Let them live on in the quiet spaces where memories are kept, where love takes root, in a world that often demands conformity. This story reminds us that love sometimes asks us to step out of line, that a single act of heart can echo through time, touching lives we may never know. What would you risk for love? Perhaps it's a moment when you chose compassion over convention, when you acted for someone who needed you, when you honored a heart over a rule. Share it, whether in a whispered conversation, a note slipped into a loved one's hand, or a story told at a community supper, and let it be a spark that lights the way for others. For love demands, we step out of line. And Francis's legacy, through Lucas' sacred act, shines on, a light for us all.